Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending this webinar. Thank you, and thank you to Standards and Best Practice for this opportunity. ISO 31000 and raising risk champions within your organization. So this will be our outline. We would introduce ISO 31000, and we'll talk about the International Organization of Standardization. We'll talk about ISO 31000. We'll talk about the concept of risk, because I observed that a lot of people have a misconception when it comes to risk. And then we'll talk about ISO 31000 and risk management. So that's in our introduction to ISO 31000. We'll talk about the concept of risk champions. Who are they? What do they do? What value do they bring? What value do they add to the process? We'll talk about the characteristics and the skills that a risk champion should have. We'll talk about training and empowering risk champions. And then we'll talk about creating an environment that values and supports risk management. We'll talk about monitoring and evaluation impact. And then we'll just tie it all up together. So this is the outline that we'll be following. Okay, so introduction to ISO, and it is the International Organization for Standardization. It's a non-governmental organization. And what do they do really? They bring global experts together to agree on what is best practice. It was established in 1946, and so far they've established more than 25,000 international standards. They have 172 members from different countries all over the world. They have 839 technical committees, and they have subcommittees that take care of different aspects of developing standards, different aspects of standards development. So now we've talked about the International Organization of Standardization. Now we'll talk about ISO 31000 2018, which is the most recent one. And it was developed for risk management. You know, like we had said before, the organization comes together to develop different standards for different industries. So the 31000 was developed for risk management. And what it does is that it provides the principles, it provides the framework, it provides the process. It gives you a guide. It's not like it's a compliance document, sort of. What it does is that it gives you a guide to help you build your own risk management framework in your organization. And the thing about it is that it can be used by any organization, regardless of the size, regardless of the activities, regardless of the sector, which means that it cuts across different businesses, it cuts across different business sizes. And the ISO standards, the 31000 standard, what it does is that it helps you as an organization to compare your own risk management practices, your own risk management framework, your own risk management policies and processes. It helps you to compare it to an internationally recognized benchmark. So you're not just working alone. You can say that, okay, compared to global best practice, what I'm doing is either it's up to standards or not. It helps you to benchmark. It provides you with sound principles for effective management and also for corporate governance. And the guidelines, the standards can be used by anyone who manages risk. It's not just for risk management professionals, not just for risk management professionals. Anyone that manages risk can use the guidelines. So that's like the basic introduction. And then I would also talk about the concept of risk. Like I said when we started, a lot of people have misconception about what risk is, what risk management is. So I'll talk briefly on the concept of risk. And I'll define it as anything that impedes an organization's ability to achieve their strategic objectives. That's like the basic definition it's a deviation from what is expected. If this is what you have expected was going to happen, and then there's now a deviation. Or it could be the effect of uncertainty on set objectives. And the thing about risk is that it could either pose an opportunity or a threat. So if it's possible for you to have a deviation that will now be an opportunity for you, that will be an opportunity for your business and for your organization. And when it's an opportunity, what do? You exploit it. You enhance it so that you can increase the probability, you can make it more consistent. But when it's a threat, you avoid it, you transfer it, you mitigate it, and all that. And the thing about life is that all entities face risk. There is no, you can't say that you are void of any form of risk. It's not possible. All entities face one form of risk or the other. However, how that risk is now managed is what will determine if you will create value, if you'll be able to protect your value, or if your value will be completely eroded or your value will be preserved. So we should not see risk as something that you have to always, you can do without. Number one, you can't do without it because it's deviation, and there will always be deviations, there will always be uncertainties. And we should not always see it as something that is bad, because like I said, it can sometimes create an opportunity. Now going to ISO 31000 and risk management. What ISO 31000 does is that it provides the framework for you. It gives you a guide based on the standard principles. They have principles, there are principles in the guide. There's a framework in the guide, and also there's a suggested risk management process that you can follow to now build your own organization's risk management framework and your risk management process. So first off, we're going to the principles, the ISO 31000 principles. And the focus of these principles is on value creation and protection. So these risk management principles are supposed to add value, create value, and also protect the value of the organization. And the first principle of ISO 31000 that we're going to talk about is the fact that it is integrated. And what does that mean? When you say that it is integrated, that means it is an integral part of your organization's activities. It's a part of, it's not something that is kept somewhere for compliance purposes or for checklist purposes. No, it is something that has to be integrated. It's an integral part of the organization's activities, the activities of the organization, and it has to be structured and it has to be comprehensive. Your approach to risk management, we are talking about the principles based on the ISO 31000 standards. Your approach to risk management as an organization has to be structured, it has to be comprehensive so that you can achieve consistent results, and it has to be customized. That's why before I said that the ISO 31000 guidelines or the standards is a guide to help you to build your own organization's risk management framework and your own risk management structure. So it will be customized. When we started, I told you that what we do in Monida Group, a lot of times it's not something that someone else has really done before. So we had to sit down and come up with a framework that is customized to our business model that works with us, so that works for us. So that's the third principle. And the risk management principle, the fourth one we'll talk about, is the fact that it's inclusive. Your approach to risk management has to be inclusive. You have to involve all your stakeholders. It's not something that starts and ends in the risk management function. No, it is all inclusive. All the stakeholders have to be carried along. It is dynamic. That's another thing. Risk is not, it's not something that is static. Some risks change, some risks are no more relevant, some risks emerge from nowhere. So you have to have a framework that is dynamic, that can adapt to whatever the current realities are. I'm sure all of us here can still remember 2020 when we had the COVID-19. A lot of things changed. A lot of things were introduced, things that we were not doing before, we had to start doing and all that. So that's the thing about risk management. It's not static. It's not some document somewhere that is just showing, that is just for compliance and all that. It has to be dynamic. It has to be in line with the current realities. But then, as the risks change, you have to also update it. I can't imagine someone now still having updates of COVID cases. No, because that has gone. It's no more relevant and all that. That's about being dynamic. And it has to work with the best available information. Your risk management approach should work with information. Information is key. Our risk management in Monida has embedded in its research and intelligence, because information, data helps you. You need to work with historical information, you need to work with future expectations, you need to always work with the best available information. And sometimes you need to go out there and look for it. Your approach to risk management, another principle of the ISO 31000 standard, is the fact that you have to also put into consideration human and cultural factors. Look at your industry, look at the fact that there can be human. I'll give an example of, if you're in healthcare, you know that your error can be not so, you can have an error rate that is not so high, but can be very fatal. So that's not a place where you encourage people to hide their errors. You have to encourage transparency so that people can be able to own up and take responsibility so that it can be addressed, and then it doesn't lead to something that is worse. So you always have to put into consideration human, cultural factors, and continual improvement. This cannot be overemphasized. I think it's a very critical part of the ISO 31000 principles. It's an approach or a framework that improves continuously. In Monida, I talk about Monida a lot. You people will have to forgive me. At Monida, we have something we call like a post-transaction review for a lot of our transactions. We always look at what went wrong, what could we have done differently, what can we do differently next time. So it's a culture of continual improvement. So these are the principles of the ISO 31000 standards, and the focus is really on value creation and value protection. And then we'll talk about the framework. I keep having issues. Okay, yeah. And then we'll talk about the framework. And the foundation of the ISO 31000 standards framework is leadership and commitment. This cannot be overemphasized. You need strong leadership and commitment from top management. For you to embed your framework into the organization's culture, into the organization's processes, you need leadership commitment, very strong leadership commitment. And integration, we've talked about this in the principles, is the fact that your framework is your risk management framework is an integral part of the organization's activities, is an integral part of the organization's decision-making process. Not only decision-making process, but also the operational process. It is integrated. Your framework is integrated into your decision-making processes, integrated into your operational activities. And then your risk management framework as an organization should be designed to meet the specific needs of your organization. This is somehow also like an emphasis of the principle of customized risk management framework. So it should be designed to meet your own organization's needs, Also, implementation. Implementation is very key. You should have a plan, develop a risk management plan, and then you assign responsibilities. It's not just to have a plan. You develop a plan, you assign responsibilities, which will help you with implementation, and then evaluation. You need to regular and constant evaluation of your framework so you can improve it. Continuous improvement, we also talked about continuous improvement in the principle. You always have to ensure that you fit your risk management principles with industry standards, current industry standards, global best practice, technological advancement. You always have to improve. Communication and consultation is also a part of the ISO 31000 standards framework. You always have to engage your stakeholders. You always have to communicate. You always have to collaborate with your stakeholders. In the ISO 31000, the risk management process in the ISO 31000 is basically about risk assessments, which involves you identify your risks, you identify the risks that you would encounter in your own organization based on your business model, based on your industry, and then you do like an analysis of, okay, these ones that we have identified. You look at their impact, you look at the likelihood. Likelihood is the probability. Impact is if it happens, how hard would we be hit and all that, and then you do an evaluation. And then you decide what treatment would be for the particular risks that you have identified, that you have analyzed. These are all in lines with the guidelines of the ISO standards. You also have to monitor. You can't just, you have to monitor. You have to have previous steps. You have to have key risk indicators, and you have to monitor them consistently and continuously. And like I said before, communication and consultation, always consult with your stakeholders, always engage your stakeholders. So far, what we have talked about the introduction to the International Organization of Standardization. We've talked about the concept of risk, and then we've talked about ISO 31000 and risk management. And we'll now talk about what are the benefits, what's the advantage of having ISO 31000. There's so many, we'll just talk about a few of them. It helps you have a more efficient business operation because you have already integrated your risk management process into the organization's structure, the organization's activities. It helps you have a common understanding of the risk principles. These risk principles across the organizations. It helps you to align your business objectives, align your risk appetite and your business objectives. It helps you to do all these alignments and all that. So those are the benefits of having ISO 31000 standards as your guide. So now we'll talk about the concept of risk champions, because this webinar is about ISO 31000 and raising risk champions in your organization. And who are they? What's really the concept behind having risk champions? Risk champions are individuals within your organizations. They do not have the core risk management function. They don't have risk management as their primary role, but then they support the risk management role. They are like an extension of the core risk management function. They help the risk management function to promote and also advocate for effective risk management policies. And there are people that you have trained. You have to train. You have to train people in different ways. You have to train your risk champions. You train them, they understand risk, they are responsible for information gathering, for experience sharing, for risk, updating risk, because they understand what it is that they are looking out for. They're well trained and all of that. And for large organizations, most especially those large organizations that you are in different geographical locations, you have different management teams. The thing is that it's very easy for you to have different attitudes to risk and also struggle to build a risk culture that is consistent. So one of the things that can help you is if you have risk champions in different parts, different locations, different teams within the organization to help you have a risk culture that is consistent, so that generally in the organization, everybody has like same attitudes to risk management. And then this risk champions framework, it also allows people to take ownership. It allows everybody to take ownership of their risk. In my organization, I tell them all the time, everybody is a risk manager. It is your primary function. Managing your own risks at your desk, it's your own primary function. It helps people take ownership of risk. It puts responsibility on the risk owners, and it also strengthens the ownership of the risk process. So this is really the concept of risk champions. Organizations within the individuals within the organization that are not a part of the core risk management function, but they help the risk management function, they support the risk management function, and they help the organization to ensure that we are able to build a consistent risk culture. That's like the summary of what the concept of risk champions is. And what are the characteristics and the skills of risk champions? Because there's no point putting people there that will not be able to achieve whatever it is that you set out to achieve initially. So you need people that have a good understanding of the business. And because for you to say you are managing the risk of a business, you have to understand the business. You have to see the big picture, understand the business, understand the industry. You need to have a very good understanding of the business that you are working with. You have to have a good understanding of the business strategies and objectives. Where are we going as an organization? What is our strategic direction? Where are we going? What are our objectives as an organization? So people that have this understanding would help. And they have to have a good understanding of what risk is, of the role that risk management has. And there are people that have to be proactive. Risk management cannot be reactive any longer with that ship has sailed. You have to be proactive. People that have an analytical mindset, and people that are committed to continuous learning. Very, very important, because you cannot improve if you don't learn. You have to be committed to continuous learning. People that have leadership and motivational qualities, people that are resilient and adaptable. That can, we talked about the fact that one of the principles of a risk management framework is the fact that it is dynamic. So for you to have a risk champion that would serve your purpose, that would serve the purpose, has to be someone that is resilient, someone that is adaptable, that can adapt to whatever the current realities are, and someone that has integrity and ethical judgment. Just on the lighter notes, when I was preparing this and I saw integrity and ethical judgment, I remember when we were much younger and we were in school, and you will be looking forward to the day they will tell you to write names of noisemakers. Why are you looking forward to the day they will tell you to write names of noisemakers? People have not even made noise already. Why are you excited? Because there are people that you already want to, you have the intention of being vindictive. I also saw a joke somewhere where someone said, my nephew is raining, and they said my nephew should not go to school. If he said, it is school, today I must go because I'm supposed to write names of noisemakers. That's just on a lighter note. Your risk champions are people that have to have integrity and can be objective and have ethical judgments and all that. So those are the major characteristics of somebody that you would see and say, okay, this is someone that can help the risk management roles. And what are the skills that they should possess? Very important. Strong communication skills. They need to be able to communicate effectively. Interpersonal skills. This is very, very, very important. You need to be able to relate with people in a way that, because there will be times as a risk manager that you will do things that people would not really want. You do things, or you ask people to do things that they really do not want to do. So you need to have the kind of skills that people will be willing, you can influence people without there being any animosity and all that. So interpersonal skills in risk management, as a core risk management person and as a risk champion, your interpersonal skills are very, very important. You need problem solving skills. You can't, it's so difficult to work in risk management or to support the risk management function without problem solving skills. You need analytical skills. You need to be able to analyze things, and then you also need negotiation skills, because sometimes risk management really is a lot about negotiation. At this point, I just want to be sure that everybody can still hear me, see my slides. We are still together.
Yes, we are following.
All right, thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. All right, thank you. Training and empowering risk champions. You know, when I was talking about the concept of risk champions, I said risk champions are people that are trained. Risk champions must be trained. You can't just throw people and ask them to, you have to train them. And the training must begin immediately. As you put them in place, you have to start to train them. And what should the training cover? What are the things that the training should cover? Introduction and basic training, basic foundational things. What is risk management? What is risk? What are the ways that you can identify risk? What are the ways? Just introduction to risk management, foundations of risk management. Understand, you also have to make them understand what their roles are. You have to define what their roles are. This is what you'll be doing, and this is what is expected of you. So their roles, their expectations, you have to train them on that. You should have one-on-one training. This is a hands-on training by the risk manager. I do a lot of this in my organization. I have to resume almost everybody's onboarding process. I am involved in it. I have hands-on training with you. I explain to you how risk management is a very integral part of the organization. I have one-on-one training with people onboarding, and it is continuous almost every time. I have an open office. You can ask me questions. If I don't have the time, I can say, okay, let's reschedule it. But as a risk manager, you always have to be ready to train people, because it's easier to train people and avert some things than to just assume that they know. So there's never really a stupid question. Risk managers, you have to always have one-on-one training. I said before that in my organization, I tell them all the time, everyone is a risk manager. And then soft skills training is very, very important. They are going to be facilitating, especially if they're in different regions, if they're in different geographical locations, they're in different teams, they need facilitation skills. They're going to be making presentations, they need presentation skills. They're going to be communicating with people. They need effective communication skills. So you need to train them on soft skills. You need to have regular one-on-one training. You need to have introduction and basic training, and you should have multi-layered and multi-year training. And what does this mean? These are trainings that align with the long-term objectives of the organization, the long-term objectives of the organization, the long-term objectives of the risk function. Training the risk champion to ensure that they have the capacity to still serve and support in line with the long-term objectives of the organization. And this training can be in conjunction with other organizations like Standards and Best Practice that organize this webinar. They also have ISO 31000 training for risk champions. So you can do this by collaborating with different training organizations, but you have to train them. Your risk champions must be trained. You don't just leave them without training, and the training should be immediately. And also they should have regular networking and success sharing sessions. This is what I did that helped me to be able to do this. This is what so they can learn from each other, so they can network, so they can have each other to also, sometimes even without you, they can reach out to each other and say, I'm having this issue. Is there a way you can, have you experienced this before? Network among themselves and also be able to also, how do you create an environment, an organization, an environment that values and supports risk management? Because a lot of times you hear risk professionals say things like, we don't have enough support, we don't have enough, it's like we're doing everything alone. You can is leadership commitment. That's like the foundation of creating an environment that values and supports risk management. Leadership commitment. And it is not just commitment that is verbal, it is visible endorsement, role modeling. You can see that the people that are in leadership, this is how they behave, this is how they operate, this is how they value risk management. And then integrating risk management with decision making. You don't make decisions, set things in place, and then now say, okay, risk, what do you think? What do we think when? What do we think when? Risk management has to be an integral part of the decision-making process. We do it together. In Monida, when my business development teams, they get a transaction, they are sending it to risk immediately. These are the contract documents. They've not even finished talking to the customer. We are already working together. So it's very, very important. In fact, I had an instance where a customer called me and he was lamenting. He was like, this guy is just talking like a risk person. And even though I tried to tell him to calm down, but it was a good thing. At his desk and all that. So leadership commitment is very important. Aligning risk management, integrating it with your strategic goals and all that. You need to have clear policies and frameworks. It is not inside your head. It needs to be clear. It needs to be comprehensive. It needs to be standardized. You need to have a risk appetite. People can go for meetings without even referring to documents and know what they can do and what they cannot do, even from the meeting, because there's a clear risk appetite statement. Everybody knows that this is our risk appetite, and these are the things that we do, these are the things that we don't do, and all that. And even if we are going to do it, okay, what can we do? Okay, we saw something. There's sometimes that people come to me and they're like, we saw something like this. We don't think it's something that we usually do, but we're thinking, how can we do it? And we sit down together and we look at it. What can we do differently? What can we put in place to ensure that we don't get our fingers burnt with these transactions? I've talked about education and training for the risk champions. Education and training in an organization cannot be overemphasized. Continuous learning, continuous training. My people tease me all the time because part of our core values in Monida is continuous learning, and I emphasize it all the time. Continuous learning is very important. Continuous learning, training, you always have to be up to date. You always have to be learning. Communication and collaboration. You need risk management meetings. You need risk committee meetings. You need risk management platforms where people can go to, where people can get information. You need risk champions network, just general communication, collaboration, and integrated risk management. We talked about this in the principles. We talked about this in the framework. We're talking about it again because we are emphasizing it, is the fact that you always have to make risk-informed decisions. You always have to align it with your strategy. And monitoring and feedback, very important. You set key risk indicators, and then you have feedback. You have feedback loops, continuous monitoring, continuous feedback. Very, very important. And then how you monitor and evaluate impact after you have launched a risk champion network or a risk champion framework, is the fact that from the beginning you have set clear objectives. You define what the success metrics will be. What are the things that we want to achieve by doing this? And consistent data collection and analysis, very important. There's no data that day that you need it. Very, very important. Continuous data collection, analysis, and then an outcome analysis. What worked well? What did not work well? What can we do better next time? And also you have to communicate impact, share success stories. This is what we did, this is what helped us. Share success stories, let there be leadership involvement and all that. So to monitor and to evaluate impact of your risk management framework and also of your risk champions network and framework, set clear objectives, continuous data collection, conduct an outcome analysis, always communicate the impacts that you have had, what your success stories are, always do a check-in and all that. In conclusion, or just to put it all together, wrap up everything, ISO 31000 is about effective risk management, and it is done by integrating risk management into decision-making and also into the organization's processes and activities. And one of the ways you can achieve this the risk champions, however, through trainings, and the entire process has to be monitored so that you can conduct an impact assessment. And then you can make required amendments to ensure that all of us as risk managers or as business owners, whatever it is, we can build organizations that are able to create, protect, build value, and organizations that are also sustainable. Thank you, everyone. Once again, my name is Ola Jumoke Adekomi, and you can reach me on jumoke.a@monidainvest.com. Thank you very much.
Standards and best practice, your partner in professional development.